Well, I was not expecting to be making this video today, but GGG have dropped the long-awaited Assassin reveal at an ungodly hour earlier this morning, and to be honest, my first thought on seeing this news this morning when I woke up was that if they're revealing an entire Ascendancy rework randomly less than 24 hours before the full livestream reveal, well, what on earth do they have planned for the full reveal? I can't wait to find out, and it's not long until we all do, but for now, we finally have the Assassin rework. 3.27 is finally getting it done, and let's get straight into it, beginning with Mistwalker, a 2-point branch notable. This node already existed before, but it's getting a big buff, as it now has 100% increased effect of Elusive instead of 50%. So Elusive is a buff that grants 30% increased movement speed and 15% chance to avoid damage from hits. But the buff decays over time and cannot be replaced until it fully decays and expires and is removed from you. So with this node, you'll have access to gaining the buff, and it will start at a baseline of 60% increased movement speed and 30% chance to avoid damage from hits. Note that Nightblade support exists, and at its maximum effect, this node would be granting a bonus 138% critical strike multiplier on a level 20 Nightblade gem, which is a lot. And there's also this Anoint only notable, which was only added to the game back in 3.25. This essentially means your elusive buff is providing stronger bonuses to you more often, but it's also lingering a bit longer, so some of the weaker stages of that buff are also going to be lasting a bit longer. So it's a bit of a trade-off there, but it gets removed earlier and you're able to then reapply it. Next up, we have an entirely new notable, another 2-pointer, Shadowed Blood. Now, this node is pretty awesome. 40% of physical damage taken recouped as life, and unaffected by damaging ailments. Now, the second modifier here, unaffected by damaging ailments, is the most beneficial version of a modifier like this, because those damaging ailments, that being bleeding, ignite, and poison, can still be inflicted on you and will persist on you as normal, but they do not deal any damage to you. So you can do some self-ailment shenanigans with this new notable to benefit from some strong bonuses, such as Moku's Embrace or Apep's Slumber and the Golden Rule. There's also the Fulcrum to allow you to reflect ignites back to you, which you can then proliferate to other monsters. However, on reading this node, one of the first things that came to my mind was Dissolution of the Flesh. This is a jewel that completely changes how incoming damage interacts with your life, and instead of losing life from taking damage, you now reserve that life instead for a period of time. And one of the huge problems with Dissolution of the Flesh is incoming damage over time, damaging ailments, debuffs, and ground effects primarily. This node allows you to immediately solve part of that problem by removing damaging ailments from the equation entirely. And on top of that, there's also the recoup portion of the node, which is very good in combination with Petrified Blood, which is another staple of Dissolution of the Flesh builds because of how those mechanics interact with each other. And I expect Shadowed Blood won't be used all that often in the majority of Assassin builds, but it will find its way into some niche setups that really do take advantage of it. Now we move on to the multi-notable branches, beginning with Toxic Delivery and Infused Toxins. Now, Toxic Delivery has essentially had some of the components of the previous two notables in this branch combined into this first node. Poison you inflict with crits deals 20% more damage, 5% increased poison duration per poison inflicted recently up to 100%, and recover 0.5% life per poison affecting enemies you kill. This notable for 2 points is incredible value. It pretty much gives you the best parts of the old nodes and everything you want really when scaling poison, that being damage, duration, and even some recovery there as well. Do note that the old Assassin had several instances of added base critical strike chance, which is now gone, but I think the power of these new nodes more than makes up for that. And I just want to mention here that the new Toxic Delivery is just extremely good on its own for a stock standard poison build. If you don't want to interact with non-chaos or physical damage types, you can just take this node and ignore the next one in the branch and it's still going to be very strong. But branching off of this node is the new Infused Toxins notable. And what do you know, I called it. All damage from hits can poison. This is the modifier that the Ruthless version of Assassin has had for a while, and it was always very strange that such a powerful modifier only existed on the Ruthless version of an Ascendancy, but now here it is on the normal Assassin. This is extremely strong, and it immediately enables so many builds, but do take note of the wording on this modifier. All damage from hits can poison, not all damage from hits poisons. This means that you still need to invest into poison chance, which is actually quite a big difference compared to the old version of Assassin that gained a significant amount of poison chance from this branch, which is now gone. Now, one of the more popular poison builds in more recent patches has been Poison Spark, which you can now enjoy on Assassin using this node. No need for any special interactions, this node will allow for just that. Another thing that comes to mind, which is less powerful these days but still noteworthy, Poison Detonate Dead of Chain Reaction. And of course, there's also the Pneumatic Dagger, which is used a decent amount. Well, by using this node, you'll no longer be limited by that base type. You can play all of the builds that were enabled by that item with other base types or even unique weapons, which will enable some very powerful builds indeed. Next up is another 2 notable branch, which includes a choice notable. So the first notable in that branch is the choice node, and you can choose between Knife in the Back or For the Jugular. These are essentially providing the same bonuses but in reverse of each other. So Knife in the Back is 100% more crit chance against enemies not on low life, and 100% crit multi against enemies on low life. Then For the Jugular is the opposite, 100% crit multi against enemies not on low life, and 100% more crit chance against enemies on low life. And both of these nodes also have the modifier Critical Strikes Have Culling Strike. Note that low life in PoE 1 is 50% of maximum life. Okay, so the stronger modifier here is likely the 100% more crit chance, as this is a multiplier on your crit chance, which would mean that if you only have your crit chance scaled to 50% before this node's factored in, it would then bring it up to 100% after the node is factored in. Now, the old Assassin had a node that granted 100% more crit chance against low life and full life enemies, but it didn't work for the large portion of life between those two, and in the case of tanky rares or bosses, this was actually quite important. However, I want to mention something here which I think is quite strong, and that's the potential Forbidden Flesh and Flame tech for these 2 nodes. So these are choice notables. The only other example we have of choice notables with Flesh and Flame jewels in current PoE is the Ascendant. And on the Ascendant, you're actually able to select an Ascendancy option and then use a Flesh and Flame jewel combination to activate another choice node from the same branch. So for example, you can select Juggernaut and gain those bonuses from the Juggernaut choice node, and then you can use a Flesh and Flame jewel to gain the bonuses from the Berserker node too, which means that based on this interaction, you should be able to do the same on the new Assassin. You should be able to select one of these 2 choice nodes and allocate the other one using Flesh and Flame jewels, which would mean that you just have 100% more crit chance and 100% crit multi all of the time against all enemies, because you'll have both of those bonuses active at once. Which is obviously incredibly powerful. That would mean that you literally only need to reach 50% crit chance to cap out your crit chance at 100%, and it's a big damage boost too with the 100% crit multi. That would be quite powerful, and based on what we know right now with how the Ascendant nodes interact, it would seem that that may be possible in 3.27. Now, the notable branching off of this choice node is Opportunistic, which did already exist on the old Assassin and hasn't changed all that much. Damage from your crits cannot be reflected, 25% more damage while there's at most 1 rare or unique enemy nearby, and 35% less damage taken while there's at least 2 rare or unique enemies nearby. Everything is the same on this node except the last line, which used to be 20% reduced damage taken and is now 35% less damage taken. Something to note there is that in the very rare case where you may have been trying to do some reduced damage taking stacking shenanigans, this may be a bit of a nerf, as reduced damage taken is additive with other modifiers to this stat, whereas less damage taken is multiplicative. However, for the very large majority of cases, this is absolutely a buff. However, this is a 4-point notable on the new Assassin where it used to be a 2-pointer, and I think this is actually quite important to mention because Opportunistic is one of the weaker nodes on this reworked Ascendancy, Mostly because while the stats that it grants are quite strong, especially the less damage taken, 35% is a lot, they're situational, and situational defenses really suck. You also need to spend more points to get here. On the old assassin, you may have taken this node on a generic build because of the reflect immunity and some situational bonuses that were quite nice for 2 points. But if you're not taking the first choice node, then you're never spending 4 points to get reflect immunity, there's just better options available to you. Okay, let's move on to the final branch, which is 3 notables. Firstly, Unstable Infusion, which is almost exactly the same as before, just ever so slightly buffed. 15% chance to gain a power charge on crit, and 30% on non-crit, and then +1 to maximum power charges. This used to be 10% and 20% chance, so that's a very small buff. And coming off of this notable is now 2 different notable options instead of the previous one, and the old one, which used to scale stats that you gain from power charges, is now completely gone. Firstly, we have Mystical Infusion. Base spell critical strike chance of spells is equal to that of main hand weapon. So this is the Sandstorm Visage modifier, but without the very nasty downside of not being able to crit with attacks. This modifier overwrites the base crit of all of your spells with that of your main hand weapon crit, providing fairly easy access to potentially very high base crit numbers. This is an incredible cast on crit notable, and I think we're going to see a whole lot of cast on crit assassins in 3.27 making use of this new node. Sandstorm Visage was already a good item, and now that you can get that modifier without the downside, and still make full use of your helmet slot, that is wild. Now the other notable branching off of Unstable Infusion is Deathmarked. Trigger level 30 Assassin's Mark on attack crit against a rare or unique enemy, and you have no mark. Mark skills cost no mana, and marked enemy cannot evade attacks. Now first, what does level 30 Assassin's Mark do? Well, not that much more than level 20 actually. The base crit doesn't scale, only the crit multi and the life and mana gained on kill scale up. So at level 30, the mark will grant 59% crit multi instead of the 49% at level 20, and then it would also grant 832 life and 103 mana gained on kill. And this will trigger with no mana cost when you hit a rare or unique enemy with an attack crit specifically, but only when you don't already have a mark skill active. It also makes the marked enemy be unable to evade your attacks, which is a decent benefit, but I'm just going to say it how it is, this notable is quite weak, but it does solve a few issues that may arise. There's only really 2 reasons why you'd use this node, and that's because you either don't have enough gem sockets to be able to fit Assassin's Mark and Mark on hit into your build, or you can't solve the mana cost of your Mark setup, or maybe it's a bit of both. Using this node solves mana costs and frees up a gem slot or 2, which could be quite useful, but overall I don't expect to see many people using this one. Now overall, this assassin rework is massive. It enables a lot of new builds, and I think more than anything, it has many interesting options that provide access to completely different build archetypes. You have the cast on crit stuff, which is going to be very popular this league. You have the all damage poisons branch, and the unaffected by damaging ailments node, and there's just so much more going on with the reworked assassin compared to the old one. I think we may finally see a PoE Ninja Ascendancy chart that doesn't have Assassin amongst the least played Ascendancies for the first time in years in 3.27. And once again, just like I said at the start of this video, if GGG are releasing an Ascendancy reveal as a random teaser less than 24 hours before the livestream, just what on earth have they cooked for the full reveal? I can't wait to find out later today, but that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching. And as always, stay tuned and stay safe.